stratospheric type numbers because nobody ever believes those types of numbers. But the reality is through a lot of the validation, we're talking 4.7 billion book value across the top 36 producers in Western Canada alone. That does not include two of the largest producers, Suncor, CNRL. So 4.7 billion book value. So in other words, I mean, just because you paid off your car doesn't mean it's worth zero. So a lot of this inventory is brand new still, but aggressive depreciation schedules in the energy industry, usually upwards around 25% a year, we'll depreciate those values on the books anyways down to zero pretty rapidly. But the reality is the inventory physically is still sound, and a lot of it's still in the wrapper. So there's merit in saying there's 20, 30, even 40 billion with a B dollars worth of assets littered across Western Canada that not only nobody knows about, but nobody's doing anything about it. So that's the scale of, that's basically why we exist, is to solve that problem. So take a fraction of that, insert it into the energy industry in Alberta, Western Canada, and there's a lot of songs to be sung around those numbers. So again, I like to stay away from the stratospheric numbers, but it's hard not to because those are the actual numbers. So
you're a, and I won't say you're a small business, but you're a small footprint of a business in an extraordinarily large industry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Like, I mean, in regards to the size of our team and the size of our technology, we're very, very thin group. It doesn't take a lot for us to keep those rolling. So through this unique combination of services and technology, right? The technology is really what allows us to scale, and more importantly, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more, T, is around the collaboration, right? We really empower the likes of individuals that are trying to make a go of this and have been trying for 20, 30 years. But just don't necessarily have the tools or the knowledge or the know-how to mitigate all the challenges along the way to effectively optimize capital recovery. That's what we do, right? We're here to empower those, and that's how we scale. So you're right, very large footprint.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that. And that is Taylor Assaly. He is the president of Iron Hub, talking about the challenges that he's seeing in the oil field industry around equipment that is laying in places with huge investment dollars, huge amounts of money that is not being used, and it's not cataloged, it's not measured, so it can't be managed. Welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I'm the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I'm here as always with Scott Connors, the Chief Change Officer at Crankset Group. He's helping CEOs make big changes in their business through vision. Thanks for joining us today, Taylor, and thanks for outlining that problem so well. Like, really in a nutshell, if we wanted to explain it at the most detailed level, I'm like talking about golden retriever level. What does Iron Hub do?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're a pretty niche market, but ultimately we help companies optimize their capital recovery. There's a lot of granular details on how we get there, but in a nutshell, pretty high level, that's what we do. We help companies that have a significant amount of inventory that they don't know about, better understand it, better communicate it internally, and ultimately optimize their capital recovery on a collaborative marketplace. So we help companies optimize capital recovery through proper materials management.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that. It's so I almost want to use the word wonderful to hear you say that. Every single small business in the world has one tool that is exactly the same. That tool is the least understood. It is the least utilized, and it is the least shown. And that tool is the balance sheet. If you think about it, and you've made a business of this, is to see, okay, let's look at that balance sheet and let's look at these assets and let's actually put our eyes on them. And let's understand that there's value in this tool that we can utilize to help optimize our business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think one of the challenges, I mean, in this unique industry, the energy industry in general, which traditionally has very poor behaviors in general, right? And I don't want to say necessarily operationally, in the field, they're probably some of the most responsible, environmentally compliant behaviors on the planet when it comes to extracting resources. But I'm talking about outside of the drill, outside of the oil well, right? We're talking procurement behaviors, materials management behaviors, this and what have you. So in regards to taking a look at the balance sheet, you're absolutely right, Scott. It's just been a very, very, very low priority in this industry's world, especially around idle assets, stranded liabilities out in the field, this and that, what have you. And I mean, a lot of people have heard a lot of the recent conversations around the likes of, the federal government coming in to help shine a light on these assets and help, really start injecting some attention into the importance of it, mostly from an environmental factor. But nonetheless, this is now starting to force companies, not only the environmental factors and the brighter light being shone on this, but we're talking about budget. The financial landscape in this industry has drastically changed, right? Where, 5-6 years ago, which is not that long ago, you'd have individuals, procurement individuals buying, they would need one, but would buy 10. Why? Because we can. Right? Are we going to use them? Yeah, maybe we'll use one, maybe two, but max 3. And meanwhile, you got, a bunch more left over in sight. So it's these behaviors that we're seeing drastically change. I think it's just a massive shift in priority. Once you start pinching those budgets, that C-suite really starts hammering down, mandating internally, hey, listen, you better know what's in our backyard. And if you don't, and once you know what's in our backyard, you better know what's in our neighbor's backyard. And once you know what's in our neighbor's backyard, you better know what's, down at the garage sale 6 blocks over before you even fathom the thought of going and buying something new. So that from a more responsible procurement behavior, but then to pair with that also more of a priority around understanding what they currently own, what they currently have, how they can internally redeploy. But again, traditional challenges are, having it being such a low priority, there's no data, there's no way to mitigate the risk of something that's been sitting in a yard or out in the field for, anywhere between 2 and 20 years. So that's why it's not being utilized. So. Yeah.
So for me to scope this problem a little bit further, and I'll pass to you, Scott, is that these companies have acquired a whole bunch of equipment and materials that they would normally use for projects, right?
Correct.
And when they made decisions like you were describing where they would buy in bulk, it was because they had ongoing and uprising ventures and time was of the essence. They needed to do it now. And then when they moved from one project in one part of the country to another project in another part of the country, it was like it was cheaper to buy some of the equipment over there than it was to actually move some of this equipment from over here. So they made this immediate choice, but never went back and took into consideration what could be done with that because it was so project by project by project, right?
You're absolutely right. Very specific.
And then that strategy is still being employed even after the world had changed for a little while. Is that they were continuing to run these projects one after another and accumulate these things. And that's what we're left with is like how many decades of doing it like that?
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. You're absolutely right.
I wanted to get in on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm doing some work with a very large trucking company in the United States. And the board has undertaken a new strategy. I'd like to think I had some influence there. R3, we're calling it. So recover, meaning rediscover it, that we know the asset's there. We know the truck is there. We know that the container's there. We know that the mechanics shop, if you can believe it, is there, right? So recover, get it back in the line of sight of an asset, right? Repair it, bring it back to market quality, usable quality, does it go back into, and then repurpose. Right. So recover, repair, and repurpose. And that repurpose part, in large part, initially went towards the supply chain and the constraints. But what we found was it's not a trucking problem. Not the amount of drivers we have, it's getting materials out of the ports. It's getting supplies, the things we need to put into our trucks to get them out of the ports. And so a lot of our recovery effort was to take a lot of those assets, and Taylor, I think you'll appreciate this, and sell them. Raise cash so that we could put liaisons at the ports to make sure that our shipments were being staged in the right place so that our trucks could just back up, and do the 180 and get on the road. And so it's that last piece that sounds like you really have done a great job in your business niche, is to really understand that repurpose piece. Yeah. And I'd like to hear more from you on that repurpose piece. Give us some examples of repurposing some of this equipment, please.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll frame it up because this is a really, really important part, because as much as we want to, because it sounds like common sense, right? It's like, well, yeah, let's just reuse it, right? We got all this stuff. We got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff, and let's just use it. So the challenge traditionally, and so everybody always asks me this, was like, geez, Taylor, like 4.7 billion book value, 40 billion market value, like why is nobody doing this? And I'll tell you why. For one, with this industry, and I think it pertains to most industries, but most predominantly in the energy industry, is very, very high spec, right? Everything is very engineered very specifically, and I tell you, when it comes to repurposing, it's difficult, right? Because you're always going to see fireworks when supply chain meets engineering. You're usually going to see things explode, right? Not literally, but boardrooms and meeting rooms and planning sessions will explode because engineers are very risk adverse, right? And supply chain is all about saving money, right? And the two usually don't belong in the same sentence, risk adverse and saving money. So, traditionally, back to those traditional behaviors, it's hitting that easy button. Let's go engineer exactly the spec that we want. Let's really not get creative. Let's just, spend all the money on this thing. So when it comes to redeploying, it's very, very difficult. So what we've been seeing, and what's really, shooting this whole initiative out of a cannon, is this newfound sense of collaboration, right? So when I say collaboration, I mean collaboration between supply chain and engineering, but also now with other third-party services that are trying to put a square peg into a round hole, very creative packaging companies and fabrication shops and, very creative engineering firms that are like, hey, listen, we've been doing it like this forever, but we didn't really have to. All we need to do is change this, change that, change that. And, even with, laying out a little bit of capital to make those retrofits, we're still saving 50% of new. But again, back in, traditional times in this industry, it's go, 1,000 miles an hour, no time to think, just hit the easy button and procure exact to the spec. Well, we don't have those luxuries anymore. At least not as much as we used to. And so this need to collaborate, even amongst themselves, right? Where once they used to compete, now producers and midstream companies are starting to collaborate a lot more. And I used to hate that word because it's in this industry, because everybody would say it, but never do it. It's like, yeah, we should collaborate. Yeah, let's collaborate. It's like, well, okay, show me. Nobody's collaborating. But now, especially around this, materials management, asset redeployment, retrofitting, whatever it is, reusing stuff that we already own, we're really starting to see it, and some creative minds are bubbling to the surface, which is really, really compelling. And it shows in the results, the amount of capital recovery on the sell side and the amount of cost savings on the buy side is a pretty amazing story to tell. So to your point, Scott, like you said, around that redeployment, reusing it, it's there, it's at everybody's fingertips. And I don't even think we've scratched the surface, but you need a significant, at least in the energy industry, which I can speak most clearly to, you need the collaboration. Without it, it's not going to happen.
It's something new that we're seeing overall. I see this like at a kind of high level through the examples of how we see orcas putting sharks into extinction. Yeah. What they found was that the collaboration is the competition, that without hunting together, it actually puts you vulnerable to the people that hunt together. And that's a big key. So you making a company that is there to help other companies collaborate in ways where they continually find that win-win, that's required in the landscape that we're seeing right now in this economy. Where else are you seeing this collaboration, Scott? Is this something that is as widespread as we're suspecting it is?
Well, first of all, and I love that Taylor, I should call him T2, since you're both Taylor, but T2 mentioned that collaboration's starting to happen. Collaboration's the most misunderstood and most misused word in business. Let that sit. And the reason why is because you can't have collaboration until you have something that comes before it. And the something that comes before collaboration is common purpose. What are we doing? Not what am I doing in this department and she's doing in that department and he's doing in that. What are we doing? COVID, for all of its problems, has created far more opportunities because a lot more companies had the same common purpose all of a sudden. Survival. Live to fight another day. Live to make it through this pandemic. And so we all of a sudden found ourselves with common purpose, and it was messy. And there was a lot of fallout in companies that lacked the structure to see purpose before collaboration. But all of a sudden now we're all on the same page. All of a sudden we're fighting for the same thing within our corporate ecosystems: survival. And once we have a common purpose, collaboration becomes a second nature activity.
So we normally need to sacrifice a few ideals in order to make this change. Now, Taylor, when you're approaching people that are resistant to this, where you're saying like, hey, we can make you aware of something that has great potential. Because so many people, it's like in race cars where they think they need to go faster, but they're going to make up more time on the brakes. You know, this is where you're scoring zeros right now. This is where you have the biggest gain. It doesn't look the way you thought it looked. What are their objections? Why do they think that, why would anybody not immedially be calling you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Scott, thank you for that. You're absolutely right. I can, definitely that common purpose resonates a lot with us. But the resistance, Taylor, is really around what, they don't know what they don't know. So, when we sing songs of, great capital recovery opportunities and redeployment opportunities, this and that, what have you, the initial knee-jerk reaction is like, well, we don't really have anything. And even if we did, we don't have any people to facilitate what you're talking about. So it's a lack of awareness, even within their own backyard, which boggles my mind still to this day. It's nuts what a lot of our clients don't actually know. And then their inability to understand how technology can help them scale their efforts, right? So anytime you talk about, doing anything, the knee-jerk reaction is like, okay, how many people do I need to throw on this? And I think that's one of the biggest misperceptions for at least what we've been working on is you don't really need anybody, right? Because again, you provide the right services, you model it accordingly, you showcase the right amount of value, and you prove to them that, hey, listen, we can accomplish this in short order without you really having to lift a finger, or very, very, very minimally. That's usually the biggest misperception, the most common pushback. And then the cost, right? Everybody thinks there's a cost. So like upfront costs. So again, in the energy sector, it's very, very difficult. There's not a lot of capital out there to just throw at stuff. It has to be justified. So again, to Scott, to your point in regards to, hey, let's just sell something and we can, it'll get this cash flow going. Very similar, right? It's like, hey, listen, guys, just send us a list, right? Send us a list of what you think you have, whether it's there or not, we'll determine that. But we'll usually find some low-hanging fruit within the first couple of days of working with somebody, transact on the marketplace, get some capital in. And it's amazing, it's amazing how that initial friction reduces when you start throwing checks on their desk. It'd be like, hey, how many times do you want to do this, right? You literally did nothing, and we sold something that you didn't even know you had, 100% to your bottom line. I mean, we can do this all day. Or we can leave, your choice.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of very valid points that I hope business owners that are listening today are hearing. The first one that I'd like to just kind of talk with you guys a little bit about is this saying that I have, that we hire 2/3 of our problems. And when I say hire, people say automatically, people. Well, what about the assets that you acquire? What does the end of that asset's life look like? What is the retirement package for that tractor, for that drill, those drill bits in the oil and gas industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
The big, right? What is the end of life plan? So if we acquire an asset with its retirement in mind, we set up a succession plan for that asset. You'd be in business. You better go hire a lot more people, my friend, because they would get it, if you will.
Yeah.
But even getting them to put an asset tag on the assets they acquire is an exception and not a norm. Now think about that. Think about that for a second. It's like buying your family's car without thinking about when you're going to outgrow it. It's like buying a 2-seater when your wife is pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't put nearly enough energy and effort into the acquisition conversation and the end of life to that asset. Our people are included. We hire people in this world to do a job. We should not do that. We should hire them to have a career with us. We should give them a place where their career, just like an asset's life depreciates, a career and doing the same job over and over becomes less and less exciting over time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're done doing this for us, what do you want to do next? Well, I'm an accountant for you, but I'd really love to be in PR. Yeah. Let's make that happen and get you some training. You give us your best in what we need. We'll give you our best in a career. You give us your best years, Mr. Tractor, and we're going to give you a really nice new life over here on a farm somewhere when you're done. Yeah. So now we've got a supply chain that connects to that asset. Mm-hmm. Our tractors become farm tractors. Our drill bits become repurposed to become recyclable materials to be used in spaceships, like the gentleman we talked to last week, Howard. So I love what you're doing. I can see the challenges in your business model, and that's the second thing, and that's the value proposition. Mm-hmm. And what you find, what I heard you say is, they don't see the value in working with us. What's it going to cost? How many people is it going to take? And, is there really going to be any money coming out of this thing? Mm-hmm. So now you're having a conversation about afterlife when they don't even know what the life was.
Yeah.
So your value proposition, and I have a large insurance company, very large, that I work with, that finally what we said in our local markets was, bring us your insurance documents and let us review them for free. And do us a favor, come pick them up when we're done, because we're just going to tell you what you should do. We're not going to try to sell you anything. Mm-hmm. And as soon as the clients, the people decided that, there's no risk in this, I can just make sure I have the right coverage. And what we found a vast majority of the time was that life insurance was undervalued by a factor of 3. So if the breadwinner in the family were to pass away or something catastrophic happened, there wasn't enough life support in the life insurance policy. You're providing an insurance policy to the longevity of these companies. That's a value proposition they don't even see when they acquire the asset. That's a big business problem for you. Have you thought about ways? Are you doing some things to solve that?
Yeah. It's, ultimately, a lot of the times, the additional value and the big value bubbles to the surface after the initial conversation, after we kind of get in there. And so very similar to you with the insurance, we try to mitigate that risk and try to get them to see the long-term value right out of the gates. One way is the same, send us all the policies. We do the same way. It's just send us your inventory list, regardless of what it is. And we can showcase to you what it looks like. And at the end of the day, if you're not interested in that, then so be it. Right. We do things like, get a little bit more creative around this, call it the standard thought process. Right. And we kind of come back through the back of the brain rather than the front of the brain, where it's like, hey, listen, have you ever even thought or fathomed about how your company profile sits in the eyes of an investor? right? If you were to walk past, like, let's not even fathom the thought of selling anything, right? Let's just think about, hey, if you walked an investor past that laydown yard that has a plethora of brand new inventory in it, and they asked you, hey, what is that in there? How much is in there? What's it worth? And what's your plan for divestment? I guarantee you 99% of them, when we first talking to them, they would be like a deer in the headlights. So it's things like that, right? These more granular value propositions all aggregating together that all come as we go. So it's being able to articulate all that, and it's amazing how we see the light bulbs go off once they start thinking away from that traditional thinking pattern around, like, okay, I want to sell all this stuff. How am I going to do that? Well, it's more than that, right? It's a lot more than that.
Scott, remember when you were talking about how often businesses are thinking about this too late? Where, like, at the time that they really need the capital recovery to put this program in motion will take more time, and sometimes they may miss the opportunity that they were trying to position for. Well, that's a key element is that the people that are sleeping on this, by the time they get in motion, they could have already been in position, and cash on hand. How valuable is that right now? Oh, Scott, did we lose your audio for a second?
No, sorry, I was on mute. So that's an excellent point. I want to tell a quick story. I was in New York City several months ago, and I've been hired by a company to kind of come in and help with their culture, which is really where I think all business is. That's my angle of entry. And I walked in, and we had a half a day together with the board, and they're wonderful people, had a great time. And I'm looking at this balance sheet, just kind of put it off to the side, and you can see the New York landscape behind you. You get kind of the fog rolling in throughout the day. It's just a beautiful sort of New York kind of day. And as we're talking, as we're getting to know, I'm getting to know the board members and the different dynamics. The CEO, she came in and left and went, whatnot. And the afternoon sun, sort of goes away on the East Coast and sort of starts to get dark, and you can see it out there on the horizon. I'm looking at, I just kept looking at this balance sheet, and it was really pretty. I mean, assets were this, liabilities were this. They said to me, if we work with you, Scott, what's the first thing that you're going to do? And that's when it came to me. I said, the first thing we're going to do is go get a whole bunch of lines of credit. And it was like crickets, right? The whole room just kind of looking like, well, we don't need lines of credit. Exactly. Well, look at all the cash. Have you looked at our balance sheet? And it had been sitting in front of me for, at this point, over 4 hours. Yeah, looks great. And that's when banks will give you lines of credit when you don't need them. So let's go shore up for a rainy day. So when it rains, we have our umbrellas. And let's work backwards from there. Which leads me to T2's point about value. When you come into an organization with an opportunity to do business together, it's no longer about price, is it, Taylor? It's about value. What value do we bring to your organization? Well, first of all, we're thinking proactively when we look at your laydown yard and we don't yet know what its true value is. That's a proactive approach. That's a value proposition. And what we're finding more and more in this COVID era is this: people do business with people. So if you can value yourself and become part of that value proposition through not just proficiency, but also in the relationship, you're building your value proposition. And it's an interesting thing that happens after that, isn't it? They're actually listening to you. Yeah. We spend so much time talking to people that aren't listening to what we have to say because we haven't built the value proposition. And I'll say this, and I'll be quiet for a few minutes, and let's talk through this. Some years, ask questions, and other years, answer them. And by all means, we are in an answer year right now. And it's organizations like yours that are building a value proposition, that are coming in and just let us take a look, and then explaining the value proposition and giving them a financial structure that says, pay us when we sell something. Doesn't cost you anything except for a portion of your profits. And that doesn't look like profit to me laying down over there. You have a very strong value proposition, and you're very well positioned in a very active marketplace in Western Canada. For that, I applaud you. And I hope our listeners are listening today to the same struggles that you have in getting your clients, potential or kinetic, to listen. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Man, as a marketer, I honestly like to try to draw the line of communication between what Scott was saying, like how leadership makes decisions is normally tied to these pain points. And by the time they realize them, they've already driven past the turn that they should take. And on the other side is like, unfortunately, people with problems can't see the solution from wherever they are within their problem. So we have to, as marketers, package up the solution and like walk it into the hole that they're in and be like, hey, good news. I've been here before, right? And next year, there's going to probably be 3 to 5 opportunities for you to acquire companies that are going to really give you advantages in the marketplace, or there's going to be some projects that are going to be larger than normal that this stuff will fund, but only if we can start this process now. Like most of our clients, in the first couple of weeks of us investigating, we're going to identify the things that are of no value to them. Let's get these out of here, right? Because these are horses that are eating your grass and they're not pulling your wagons. So let's move these ones along. And then let's go back and take a look at what the frequency is. You use all these other tools and just get into it. But that like analysis, that's the same thing that we do at Gravidia. We call it an exploration analysis. This is how visible you are. Pluto was a planet for a lot of years. And it turns out it was just a weird misshapen rock with really good marketing. So we've got some things that Scott, you had some things that piqued your interest this weekend. This was one of them. As far as you can see it on screen here, it says Google misled publishers and advertisers. Unredacted lawsuit alleges. Take us through it.
Well, this is part of that digital marketplace, and these are small businesses that are affected here. If you're going to spend money on Google AdWords, or you're going to spend money to build your SEO presence, and T2, I know that, it's important for people to look up, the keywords that might find you and connect you to them. And you're probably thinking and probably writing down a lot more keywords after your conversation with us today, and good for you. But this is really what happens when you have companies that are too big. This is what happens when you have monopolies that are fretting out competition. And Google doesn't want innovation because Google owns the marketplace, right? And so when you see something like this, that Google in this algorithm was actually proprietarily putting some advertisers or some companies ahead of other, that's unfair competition. And we as small business owners need to be very conscientious of that, and very conscientious of working together to do the right things. And we need to take selfish out of the algorithm and put selfless in front of it. It's not about whether T2's business succeeds. It's about whether his industry is successful. Because if his industry is successful and his competitors, a word I don't believe in, competition, I believe in strategic alliance, we're better together. So we need to be very conscientious of how we're spending our ad dollars and making sure our return on investment is not at the behest of somebody else unfairly. Now, that one really hit hard for me.
It affects so many companies. Like there are so many companies, like Google is like what Yellow Pages used to be. And to think that they're, juking the size of pages for certain people, and like, the ink's a different cost if you're in a different sector, and it's all based on, driving the bottom dollar for them. That's got to hurt that's public information now.
Yeah. And hopefully there'll be corrective measures taken quickly.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And jump in anytime you like, Taylor. We've got some other things that are floating along. Scott, you had sent me over this information on Activision and Blizzard. So their employees strike for a third week in solidarity with Raven QA. Yeah. What do you see here?
Well, did you see what happened to the second chapter of this story?
Take us through it.
Sure. So Activision Blizzard, which, by the way, I'm a Call of Duty fan. I'm not very good at it, but I do enjoy it in some of my spare time. Activision Blizzard, for those that are listening and don't know, they make computer games, and they make a lot of the good ones. but their culture is crap. And yes, I said that publicly on live feed. And because of that, their employees, which is another word I don't use, stakeholders should be the word, they revolted. Strike is another word for revolt. Enough's enough. We've had enough of the way you're treating us. Not treating a one, but treating a collective of ones and us. They went on strike. And the other side of the story, and I'm not sure if you have it to put up, Taylor and T2, I'd love your comments on this. Microsoft came in and bought them. And they bought them for multiple billions of dollars. And one of the things I can say about Microsoft is they have a wonderful culture. Now, there's in that building people that might disagree, but overall for a company of that scale. And so what happened in crisis, for one, became opportunity for others. And those employees, by speaking up and rising up and getting the way they feel into the public mind space and visually, allowed a company like Microsoft to say, come be with us.
Yeah.
And so bad culture was absorbed by better culture.
Yeah.
And you're going to see more and more of that. And you know what, T2, what are your thoughts on culture in the workplace? You deal with some pretty interesting ones out there in oil and gas.
Yeah, you know what? I see it all the time. The whole culture conversation is so compelling to me because it's so blatantly obvious of what's good, what's bad, and it's so blatantly obvious on where the opportunities lie for improvement, in my opinion. So no differently than we've seen such a massive shift in financial landscape in this industry, and you know, not paying too much attention to the word financial, just the fact that there's this massive shift. It's kind of this changing of the old guard to the new guard. It's this massive demographic shift. I'm not blaming demographics on culture by any means, but you do see some trends where there's an older way of thinking and a newer way of thinking. And the newer way of thinking definitely embraces culture a lot better, in my opinion, than the older way of thinking. And so I think we're going to keep seeing these storylines like this where, and again, there's always, I always say there's always three sides to the story too. But at the same time, when you start seeing trends, it's pretty obvious where, people need to be happy. The old times of, working in an office 9 to 5 versus, hey, some flexibility, work from home, this and what have you. What motivates individuals that are in the workforce today versus 20 years ago is completely different. And so the messaging and the work dynamics and the office dynamics and everything all encompassed around culture. I think a lot of organizations really need to pay attention to that. And if you have a really, crappy culture, you got to get on that right quick, because today's workforce is not afraid to strike, to revolt, to push back, to have a voice. Right? Everybody has a voice now, and if your culture is not in tune with who's on your team, that's a recipe for disaster. But recipe for disaster for one company is also a recipe for opportunity for another, as we've seen with Microsoft. So I think it's compelling. I think it's really important. It should be a number one priority for any organization, is to have their culture in tune monthly, right? Check in. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, well said. And I want to replace another word in the business vocabulary. I want to take the word culture out of it. Every time you say the word culture to anybody in a C-suite, their eyes kind of glaze over. It's like when you ask your child, have you done your homework? And they start talking and the first word isn't yes. Your eyes just sort of glaze over, right? So let's take the word culture and just put it away. And let's replace it with the word care. How much do we care about our people? Really care? Culture will follow care. Mm-hmm. Care doesn't follow into culture. You drop culture out of it and just really talk about caring for our people. And the things that motivate some are not the same that motivate others. And interestingly enough, money is not the primary driver anymore. Happiness is. And how do you care about somebody's happiness? You actually care about them. Like, I really care about you. How are you today? And listen to their answers. Care about your people, and your culture will come a long way.
Okay, so I think that this is going to be a big weapon in the future. So I really believe that businesses are cybernetic. They're teams of humans and computers that are working together to achieve goals together. But humans are the highest resource. So when you see a company like Microsoft buy this company, it's what I've seen to be the Richard Branson strategy. So Richard learned about toxic culture in the music industry. And once he figured out how to solve it, where did he go next? He followed the complaints. And he followed the complaints into airlines and cellular. Where are we complaining more than airlines and cellular, bringing that virgin culture? And I agree with you in part, Scott. I think that that the thing that the C-suite can't see is that the activity of culture is caring. Caring is the verb for the culture you want to build, and you have to be, do, have. You have to be caring in order to, and do caring things in order to have culture. And that's going to be something that has to live in everything. Like we call our huddle Grindstone in my real estate company. And it starts every morning with, what are you grateful for? And one question that helps us all get to know each other better. One of the great debates earlier this week was, if you could only have one utensil for the rest of your life, would it be a fork or a spoon? But these are the things that help people care for each other, is the more they know, right?
Yep.
So watch out for the culture hackers. I really believe that they're going to be the key, and like the CEOs that you should be looking for over the next generation here. Now, Scott, you have one more that we're going to roll through here, and this is wage gains for the poorest paid workers are at a 20-year high.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, well, first of all, pay your people. Pay your people, right? The second thing is, at the expense, if you put that graph back up, you'll see that it's that payment increase on the lower tier is at the expense of, see that divergence starting to come in, you look at the very end there, at the expense of the higher paid people.
Entrepreneurs, can I hear you? People that resisted doing any layoffs or putting people into furlough, where are you at, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So what we're doing is there's a redistribution of earnings, and earnings is long-term wealth, right? And so we're starting to pay the people that are actually doing the work instead of the people telling us what work we should be doing. And the people that have been telling us about the work we should be doing are kind of joining us and saying, what's the work that should be done? Now, as I said before, some years ask questions, some years answer. You watch what happens to great companies in the next 4 quarters. They are going to skyrocket. Those people that are being paid better, not to stay, but to play together. And what we're going to find is, and that graph could be replaced with one word, and that's trust. Mm-hmm. What we are learning now is that trust is always gained and only gained through shared experiences. And when we share our experiences together, we trust one another more. And it's easy for me to play and make less up here so that I can reward the people down here doing the work more. And so we're seeing what we're going to see after that split, trying to get my hands right, after that split is a convergence where we're all paid more equally. John Deere is a great example of that. Microsoft is a great example of that. Ford Motor Company is a great example of that. I'm waiting, and I think T2 is probably waiting for that example to permeate into the oil and gas industry a little bit as well. Right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, back to kind of like that older way of thinking versus the new guard, where, you know, I think there's this level of appreciation that's coming to fruition where, you know, for a long time, you know, the guys in the trenches, you know, in the back room, sweeping the floors, you know, keeping all the nuts and bolts greased up, you know, were an afterthought. They're buried back there. They become, you know, forgotten about. And I think ultimately the more the C-suite really gets to understand their business as it grows and develops, they're forced to dig into the weeds and get into the nooks and crannies and understand, you know, how they got to be so successful in the inner workings of their organizations. And I think there's just a massive increase of appreciation for how they actually got to be there and what it takes to maintain, and you know, pair that with just overall, you know, valuing your entire organization's workforce from soup to nuts, right, top to bottom, left to right, back to front, and they're realizing how important those parts are. You know, take one cog out of the wheel, and it's amazing what it'll take to actually be reactive to fix all of that, right? Let's be proactive. Let's keep everybody motivated, every cog in the wheel motivated, moving forward, all towards a common goal. And it's amazing how that company performance, where they thought it was already striving, it's like, wow, we just blew that out of the water. Maybe we should have been doing that a long time ago. So I'm excited for what the future holds for a lot of these organizations that hold that overall holistic value of everyone in their workforce on a high pedestal.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I love that observation. I was having a conversation with a senior HR executive in the automotive industry a week or two ago. And she said to me, our philosophy has changed. And what we're saying now is the dirtier your hands are, the more money you should be making. And I think that's the age, that's the age of appreciation that we're in now.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it. Now, Taylor, you are also the founder of Iron Hub, and this was a startup now 4 years old, right?
Yeah, 4 coming on 5, yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's so exciting. And, it's really neat because there's so many businesses that don't make it this far. When you're thinking about a startup and creating a new idea that you did, like, it's really like building an airplane from scratch while you're falling. Like, people are like, yeah, build your wings while the way down. And it's like, no. That's a solopreneur. An entrepreneur builds an entire plane and finds other people falling, right?
Yes.
So this is your second entrepreneurial expression. You're so smart in your approach. I just love hearing about what you're working on. How do you feel? I feel like the world is changing towards more entrepreneurship mindset. Is that helping you attract talent?
Yeah, I think so. I think the mindset that's out there right now is very conducive to iterative approaches, right? So where traditionally I feel, and I've made previous ventures in the past where everybody wants to boil the ocean, have the thing, and then try to jam it into corporate offices, and so whether it's B2B or B2C or whatever it might be, you're just trying to ram this elephant rear end into something where it's just you don't understand why it's working. So I really feel like taking the iterative approach, and again, we're half of our company is really considered a technology company. So in my opinion, good technology development is iterative approaches, not taking your ego and putting it up on the shelf and thinking that your ideas are the best. So really leveraging your client base, doing a lot of validation, doing a lot of iterative improvements along the way, and really building it on the shoulders. So I think with that being paired with an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is growing exponentially, right? Even in Canada, Calgary's entrepreneurial community is crazy, and Edmonton as well, Kelowna, Vancouver, all these city centers across Canada, especially from a tech basis, I'm finding is really compelling. But ultimately very, paired with an entrepreneurial mindset where it's like, hey, listen, we need to understand the problem wholeheartedly first before we go and try to, assume that what is in our brain is going to sell, right? So it's like, let's start talking, right? Let's start asking questions. Let's start small, walk before you run, bootstrap, all that, everything that, radiates entrepreneurial spirit. I think has really helped us not only gain some of the partners that we have from a development perspective, but an ongoing and operational perspective. They appreciate that more than we know, and it really does help us isolate who we work with, right? If you're thinking that you've got a big idea and it's already sold when you doesn't have anything on paper yet, hit the road, buddy. We'll see you again some other time. Whereas, the groups that come to us, whether it's an individual that wants to work for us or a partner that wants to sell for us or a technology company that wants to integrate with us, that's what we look for is this, let's start at a granular basis, build on the shoulders of our clients, take those iterative approaches and, bootstrap and take, walk before we run, eat the elephant one bite at a time. All of those, right, are definitely something that's helped us not only develop to where we are, but at a pace, right? I feel like the pace in which we grew was way faster than I had ever imagined, right? And we just listened, right? We listened to our customers and we took baby steps along the way, and here we are.
I really hope that there's entrepreneurs listening today that will go back and hit the replay button on that, because that is the secret to success long term. And when you say the word entrepreneurial, everyone thinks Elon Musk, Everyone thinks you just, and that is the less than 1/4 of 1% of however many zeros plus add a couple. What you're doing is you're building upon your successes, and you're learning from your successes, and you're leveraging those successes in your next level decisions. I cannot congratulate you enough, and I wish you were a public company because I'd be hitting the buy button right now. Congratulations on that strategy. That is well done, sir.
Awesome. No, appreciate that.
So as we look to wrap up, we want to see what you see coming into 2022. You got any bold predictions, Taylor?
You know what, at least in our industry, and I think in other industries as well, I think we're going to continue to see more amalgamation, more aggregation. A lot of companies that have found the secret recipe to bring in smaller companies that are doing the little things right, trying to pull them in, but providing them an environment where they continue to do the small things right, but under a larger umbrella. I know in our industry, through the financial challenges and the environmental challenges and the political challenges, it's definitely weeding out all the players that would traditionally have, call it, poor behaviors, irresponsible behaviors, inefficient operations, whatnot. So we've already seen that over the last couple of years where, the ones that are collaborating, the ones that are working together, the ones that are showing more transparency. The olden days was all like, nobody look to where my resources are. It's all me, and I'm not going to share anything. Well, those times are done. I hate to break it to you guys, but everybody knows where the resources are. Now it's a matter of how to most efficiently pull it out of the ground. So I think the same relates across all industries, not just energy, where it's like, hey, listen, there's not a lot of secrets, right? It's a matter of, in regards to, what we're going after. We all know who wants what, this and what have you. It's how can we execute efficiently? How can we collaborate together, to really provide the end user what they need, right? Rather than the end user being like, hey, I'm going to buy this and this. Now I have two things. Well, geez, wouldn't it be nice if I could buy this and this from the one person, right? So things like that, just, I think those that are doing a good job now are going to continue to do a great job there because they're the ones that are listening. I'm anticipating that we'll see a lot more significant acquisitions. But at the same time, we're going to see a lot of new technology. Entrepreneurialism is at an all-time rampant pace, which is so exciting to me. And it never ceases to amaze me. Some of the ideas that I see, the business pitches. I help out, with some business development and youngsters with pitching business ideas and this, what have you. And it just is so compelling. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing, right, year over year, right. It's like once you thought you saw everything, it's like, oh my God, why didn't I ever think of that? It's amazing. So these bright minds of the future are pretty awesome.
Steroids now. Yeah. Like we have Skylab's Innovation going to be on the podcast the next couple of weeks. These girls have a high school project that NASA took notice of. So they made insulation from sustainable materials that can be used in jackets and in space.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that coming out of high school right now, like the stuff that the way that people are looking at things from a different lens, I think that we all recognize that there wasn't many conversations where three people like us sat around and talked about what a great cab ride they had.
Yeah.
And the person that noticed that wasn't happening, like that group became billionaires with Uber. And so seeing the problems that couldn't be solved 10 minutes ago, 10 days ago, 10 weeks ago, 10 years ago, those are the most valuable people out there, is the people that can see that collaboration. And what you're doing right now to simplify it the way that people can grab on it everywhere is that businesses have a bunch of horses that are in other people's fields. Mm-hmm. And they're feeding and they're causing lease rates, and it's an inefficiency, and it's not fair to the horses, and it's not fair to the fields, right? Like this is something that with oil field equipment is affecting environments. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you say, hey, listen, how about we count it all and then account for it all? And that's something that you will help someone plan, and then you only win when they win. Do I hear you right? where there is no upfront cost. It's just when I win, we win.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh man, you've made something exceptional, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
I appreciate having me. That's pretty awesome.
Well, my name is Taylor, and I'm here with other Taylor as well as Scott. And Taylor and I have been friends since we were 6 years old. We learned how to shoot guns together. We water skied. We had parents that were entrepreneurs. My dad was the local insurance guy, and your dad was the local jeweler.
That's correct.
And to think that now we're in this other venue, both with titles like president. I don't feel like a president. Do you feel like a president?
I do not.
Yeah. I thought I'd get the driver or something like that, or at least the Secret Service guy. But in that case, like I honestly think it's been a cool path, and it's been cool to run it alongside of you. So thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. It means a lot to me.
Likewise. See, thanks a lot, Scott and Taylor. Keep doing what you're doing, man. This is I follow you like I'm trying to think of an analogy, but I can't think of a witty one. But it's super exciting, and what you're doing is awesome. And Scott, it's great to meet you as well. Love it, every minute of it, and I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, Taylor, it's been my pleasure and an honor for sure.
Well, thank you for joining us. This has been Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor Hack. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia. I'm here, as always, with Scott Connors. He is the Chief Change Officer at Crankset Group, and we were joined by Taylor Assaly. Taylor is the president of Iron Hub, a company that is solving materials and equipment management in the oil field. So if this is on your mind, you should definitely get in touch with him. And thank you again for sharing your ideas, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.